Welcome to Revline Racing's official podcast. Revline Racing is a professional simulated racing team focused on being as competitive as possible on iRacing. Primarily competing in the NASCAR iRacing series, Revline accomplished 29 wins, 15 pole awards, 83 top fives, and 5,248 laps led in the 2022 season. Hosted by Locke and Ryan Crofut, our podcast will allow listeners to hear firsthand how we perform week to week, what plans we have for the coming week, and the opportunity to get to know our drivers through guest appearances. Thank you for listening. Enjoy. Welcome to the Revline Racing Podcast. I'm Evan Locke, Revline's media manager and one of your podcast hosts. And with me is co-host Ryan Crofut, the owner and leader of Revline Racing. With us later on in the episode, of course, we have another guest, Richard Peterson, who is a new driver to Revline Racing. Ryan, last week was a very interesting week in the NASCAR iRacing series at the new Super Speedway, which is Atlanta Motor Speedway. I think personally I preferred it a little better in the old configuration. I found it was a little less dodgy in the sense that throughout the race, you're kind of looking to see who you've got to keep your eye on. You've got to be really picky about who you're pushing and drafting partners are nowadays. That's kind of where I was at with it. What do you think about the track yourself? I know you probably have a different opinion than I, but
yeah, no, I agree completely. The old configuration was a lot better, and I feel it took more skill. I mean, it's a different type of skill here, but I definitely feel the old configuration actually, definitely had more strategy in place with tire saving, what line to run, whether it's the top or if you're going to Harvick it and run the bottom. Fuel mileage played more of a key in that. I mean, it could here too, depending on how cautions fell, but we saw last week there was plenty of cautions. But anyway, so looking at the Revline Racing's team statistics last week, everyone finished outside the top 10. We had nobody inside the top 10, with the exception of Christopher Norris, who finished 10th, and you, Evan Locke, who finished first with 84 laps led, and you managed to pull off the back-to-back wins this week and the previous week. So how does that feel?
I got to be honest. I started off the year with two really rough races to start the year, and was lucky to get a top 5, I believe at Vegas. And so to get the back-to-back wins at Phoenix and then here again in Atlanta feels really, really good to just kind of have some really good momentum building. I've told myself that regardless of what happens this week at COTA, to just build on what's been building with Atlanta and Phoenix and even Las Vegas. COTA is a whole different beast. I am far from a road course expert. I can hold my own, but so looking to get back to the ovals next week again, ideally. But I'm really excited with what we've got so far.
Yeah, I think this week at COTA, we put ourselves in a pretty good position. We have a really fast setup thanks to Jordan Smeets. Really stable setup. The only thing I'm worried about, track temps are kind of changing pretty fast at Texas right now with the cloud coverage. So, when we're starting the race off and qualifying and early in the race, you're looking at, 100 plus track temp. And then towards the end of the race, you're looking at, possibly being below 90 degrees. So you're talking a big swing in track temp, which we're not usually used to unless it's, like a late afternoon race or something like of that sorts. But COTA should be pretty interesting this week. I'm really excited. I'm pretty optimistic over, how many wins we should be able to get this week. I think we have some pretty fast cars and some really good drivers to be able to pull it off. Going back to Atlanta though, I'm kind of nervous. Well, I shouldn't say. I'm kind of curious, I guess, how Atlanta plays out in the future races. These next, let's say by the end of next year, where are we gonna be with this Atlanta Super Speedway? Are we looking at finally being able to figure it out, or do we think it's just going to be pure chaos for the foreseeable future anyway?
Yeah, I think so. In real life, I think as the track wears out, I think we're going to see handling become a much bigger issue. And as the track wears out, the cars will be a lot looser, therefore making it a lot harder to stay um, lined up with each other. How quickly that will transfer over to the iRacing servers, that remains to be seen. I think until that changes, until that gets updated and modified, regardless of how fast it ages in real life, it really doesn't affect how fast it ages online until it's actually manually done by the admins and whatnot. So I think as that plays out, I think we're going to see Atlanta turn back a little bit more into what we're more familiar with in oval racing, a little bit more spread out and things like that. I think what it'll actually lead to is bigger runs, but because it'll be broken up a little bit better, I think there'll actually be more opportunity for passing because you'll be able to easier switch lanes easier and things like that. And that's kind of something I'm really hoping to see, really looking to see, and I think that's what we're probably going to see in real life before we see it on the iRacing servers. But that's I think when the racing's going to get really interesting and take out some of that luck element, some of that there's a little bit of a wild card element to those drafting tracks where everybody can have speed simply by being in the draft. Um, open setup allows us to have a little bit of an advantage simply because you can modify your car, and we have a great setup builder. Actually, we're starting to get a great setup team, so it gives us a little bit of an advantage there. But anyone can kind of suck up to the field and make some moves. And so I think as we transfer away from that and get rid of that, I won't say luck element necessarily, even though it is a luck element, but it's more of that parity element where setup doesn't necessarily dictate what you can and cannot do. I think that's when we're going to see a lot better racing at Atlanta.
Yeah, and you made a really good point there. I haven't really considered. As this track wears, as that oil comes up, right, and wears out, do we see this track change? And I think you're right. I think it's going to change some, but how much is NASCAR going to be willing to let it change? If it starts changing where you can't run the bottom wide open anymore, or for the most part wide open, are they going to go down and put PJ1 down there or something and force that lane still? I mean, obviously it takes a little while to activate that, but it makes it interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing it where you're having to get out of the throttle going in on the entry, even if it's just for a second, and then you have to actually be a little concerned, getting on the throttle too early if you're going to hit the wall on exit. Something like your typical mile and a half tracks or mile tracks. Like Kansas would be a pretty good, I guess, representation of what I'm talking about. Um, Michigan's, I mean, that's a 2 mile, but same concept. You're lifting slightly, but you're also in the throttle a lot.
Yeah, crazy on throttle times, but what we saw this week on the server at least is you were a little bit tight when you were really when you had a car right on your nose and a car right on your bumper. You were a little bit tight on entry. We were having to burp it. I don't really feel like we saw that in real life, and so there is a little bit of a disparity there. But I think we'll actually see that the handling becomes closer to the virtual world in real life, pairing up there as the track wears out. I think that's when we'll see the overlap. I'm hoping that NASCAR allows us to see what the track race is like worn out, because then we can say, okay, which product is better. And I think that's what's best for the fans. I think that's going to be, I think that's what's going to create the better racing is that worn out surface. And I really hope to see that translates over well to the iRacing servers, because that's where the racing's fun, man. When you're stuck in a pack and you can't really go anywhere, that's no good for anybody. Especially as much as I love iRacing, we don't have the caliber of drivers in most splits like we see in top level NASCAR, obviously. And as much as those guys are able to hold a line very, very solid, we don't necessarily see that translate over to the service. And that comes with its own detriments and downfalls. So hopefully, as the track wears, they will let that translate over. It gives us a little bit of room from those who perhaps aren't necessarily on top of their game as much as they should be, and gives us that room to to allow our setups to breathe a little bit and show what they're capable of in our setup shops.
Yeah, I agree. Those are some really good points. So, going back to Coda, how many wins, top fives, top tens, do you see Revline getting this week? I'm gonna say we're gonna get 3 wins, and I'm talking NASCAR iRacing Series, not regular races, practice races, but NASCAR
Right.
iRacing Series. I'm thinking 3 wins, probably 4 top 5s at least, and I mean including the wins though. We're gonna have at least one other top 5, probably 2 others, and I'm gonna say 3 or 4 additional top 10s on top of that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I won't get into numbers simply because I don't know everyone's driving standard, but I do know that we've got some really strong guys. The guys that I've raced with, for example, that I feel really confident with this week. You got guys like Kyle Tate. You got guys like Norris, who was putting down really good laps. Christopher Norris, that is. Jeffrey Bala has already won one of the A Open Series races. We're looking for him to do well. Sean Rogers, Jordan Smeets, the guy who built the setup. Those are just 5 guys that I can list off the top of my head that I'm really looking forward to seeing have really great runs. And I think we've got all the opportunity in the world to have a great week at Coda. Even if individually I'm not as optimistic about my own performance, I am really optimistic about the team performance as a whole, and that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think after coming off of what was our arguably worst race of the year so far, that of Atlanta last week, I think this
Right.
year we're looking at potentially having, or sorry, this week potentially having probably the um, best overall statistically so far this year race.
Yeah, I think so too. And typically too with road courses, we do see a little bit smaller fields, and that never hurts in reality.
Yeah. So we will now be taking a short ad break. When we come back, we'll be talking with our guest, Richard Peterson.
Revline Racing's official podcast is brought to you by the following: Resurgence Apparel. Go to theresurgenceapparel.com for all of your apparel needs. Partnered with Champion Clothing, Casemate phone cases, and FlexFit hats. Before the Green and After the Checkers podcast. Found on all major podcast platforms. Kyle Tate voiceover and narration. For the ultimate source in turning your audiobook dreams into reality. Jerky Pro, the go-to snack choice for gamers and athletes. AIM Supplements. Aim above ordinary standards with simple, safe, high-quality nutrition products. Player One Coffee. Every bag roasted to order for maximum refreshness. Ma Energy. Get simple energy made just for you. Rex Pair, the ultimate tire puncture repair kit. Thank you again to our sponsors. So glad to be back here. We've got a great guest in the studio with us today, with Richard Peterson, who happens to be a new member of Revline Racing. He's been on the service since August of 2021 and predominantly does run NASCAR iRacing Series races, which is where we really focus on. So far, he's gotten 16 overall wins, 89 top 5 finishes, 25 pole awards, and has led over 650 laps. Um, Also has finished 3rd place in the NASCAR Class B and has won a NASCAR Class A championship. So Richard's really been developing quickly among the service. Richard, if you don't mind me asking, what made you get into iRacing? Were you already sim racing before? Did you come from perhaps the console world and get into iRacing? Is this the first type of sim racing you've done? Where? Tell me how you got here.
Yeah, so coming directly from console. So initially focusing on as what we know, right? The Heat franchise, which is you really can't call that sim racing, but it is fun, it's enjoyable. And ultimately, as I grew driving in those Heat series, I wanted more of a challenge, more of a realistic sim scenario, and iRacing ultimately was my choice. And I'm thankful that I made that choice.
Yeah, as someone, to be honest, I actually came from the Heat world as well. Got into leagues and stuff in the Heat world, and it was fun, but there was you're right. There is a certain element that's missing that you just can't call it sim racing. And one thing that I love about iRacing, and you can back me up if you agree, or you can tell me I'm wrong if not, but I do find that the quality of competitor is a little bit better, not necessarily only in performance, but even in professionalism and how we race each other with a certain level of respect. Simply, I think this is why, is because we're all paying out of pocket every week. It's not, oh, I bought the game and now I can treat it however I want. But I think it's because we're buying we're buying tracks, buying content each month, not to mention the actual subscription. And that's kind of where I think the difference is. And like I say, correct me if I'm wrong or if you agree, but is that kind of what you're seeing across the board or?
I definitely agree with that. The competition is not only better, more professional, more polite. It's cleaner racing, and it's just a better overall experience from the get go, right? Whether you're just starting an iRacing, it's just a totally better experience, and it was a real game changer for me.
And that's not to say that everyone races clean. There are still Ryan Crofuts in the world, right?
Yeah, just have to bring me in there. That's pretty funny considering how practice went at Atlanta last week with you. But
Yeah, well, I've always said practice is the place to try things that you're not sure you want to do on the real race, right?
that's right. That's right. And that's where it's fun too, you know. But
Right.
Richard, so Revline's passion, as Evan stated earlier, it kind of falls towards NIS for the most part, NASCAR Racing Series. That's what we really focus on. That's what we're good at. What made you have any interest in that series? Was it more so us, or did you have that interest before you came over to the team?
Yeah, surprisingly enough, it is 100% once I came over to Revline. To be quite honest with you, I didn't even realize that the NASCAR iRacing series existed. I would just do the general lobbies, right? Open A class, whatever it may be, open B class. But once I came to Revline and heard about the NIS, I started looking into it. Um, and I've enjoyed every race that I've been in. The splits are a lot tighter when you're running the NIS, which makes it even more interesting. And it's really been enjoyable.
Yeah, that's I think a lot of the reason we like it as well. And since you came to the team, I think you've been here what a month or two now, I believe.
Correct. Yep. Right before the season started for NIS.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. And so since you've been here, and I don't remember, perfectly how you drove then or not, but in my opinion, I feel like you've made some pretty strong progress so far. And since you've only been on the service since August of 2021, I mean, that's a really short period of time to pick up the sport really quick on this service. Have you seen yourself, progress this last month or two while you've been doing NIS?
I definitely have. It has definitely pushed me to another level. It's challenged me personally. I spend more time practicing now, more time, fine tuning and getting to understand the tracks, because I want to do good. I want to be competitive. So it really it makes me elevate my game, and it makes the overall experience more enjoyable.
And coordinating that into the practice some. I think that's one thing we've done really well with having brought in some pretty good talent coming in here these last couple weeks and last month and 2 months or however long you've been anyway. We've brought some talent in practice that's motivated all of us to improve ourselves. So it's really nice to see guys coming in and improving, but they're also helping the team benefit as far as individual drivers as well. But even going further past that, as you said, testing the track and how the setups are reacting and stuff, and being able to coordinate that with the rest of the drivers on the team, providing feedback. It benefits everybody, and I think that's why we have such fast growth on this team. And I think that's why we're going to be doing really well as the season progresses, and we can keep our guys, these core guys that we just brought in. The longer they stay around and the longer we develop with them, I see us having some great success coming, summertime. Is that something you're recognizing too, or do you have a different perspective on that?
No, I agree. I really think everybody's going to have their moments where maybe they struggle at a track, maybe they're struggling with the setup, and you need somebody to show you maybe some of the tricks, right? A good example would be this week. I hopped in the car with Kyle and we went around Coda. I did not own Coda before this week. Purchased Coda, so my first laps around Coda were with Kyle, so I could kind of understand what we're looking at, what the grip level is, braking points, gears to be in, etc. And it was a huge help. Probably I learned in 3 laps what I couldn't have learned by myself in 100 laps. So it's definitely a huge benefit to have a strong team that can kind of show you the ropes and teach each other the little tricks of the trade.
Yeah,
And Kyle's
go ahead.
Yeah, Kyle's got the mentor mentality too. He's very much a student of it in the sense that when he's on the track, he's very focused on what he's attempting to learn and develop, and that's a real core strength of his. And I mean, I'm sitting here looking at your statistics, and one thing that I find that's really a strength, for example, you've got 3 pole awards so far this year in NIS, and so that's an obvious something that I can see looking on paper as a strength of yours. But sometimes we view ourselves a little bit differently. So where is it that you find that you're really strong? What strengths do you see in your iRacing game that perhaps we might not see in a statistics sheet?
Yeah, I think right now, running in the top 5, being able to push the car to the edge without going over, is really what I feel like is a strength of mine. On the opposite side of that, as we all know in iRacing, knowing when not to push so hard that you burn your tires off, it is also a really strong suit. It showed in some of my results in NIS so far this year. But honestly, if I could have a little bit of luck go my way, the results would be even better than what we're looking at now. So really feel like finding the edge is obviously one of my strengths. And then knowing how to get to that edge and kind of not use your tires up.
Yeah,
Consistency on the edge kind of thing.
Yep.
To talk on
that's fair.
What you're talking about as far as if you had some better luck, let's say, in some of these past races. We've ran together in some of these races in NIS, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Like going back to what happened to us at Vegas, we were planning for that long green flag run all race long. So every time a caution came out, 10, 15 laps into a run, we're thinking, oh, well, we're going to have to take tires here. We're going to have to take fuel because if it goes green, it's going to benefit us in the long run. Well, halfway through the race, we never got the long green flag run. Finally, we're like, okay, we're just going to stay out. We're going to get another caution. We have to save the set. We've used too many sets. We need to save. Of course, that's exactly when we have the long green flag run. And it was so unfortunate because if that didn't happen, I think we could have had a potential to at least probably both of us be in the top 10, if not, one of us win and the other be in the top 5. I'm not sure. But we set ourselves up really good, and unfortunately, that race didn't fall how it should have in either of our eyes.
Yeah, I agree. We had super strong cars. Just the pit choices we made just hurt us. That we were hoping for that long green flag run, like you said, and it didn't come. And when it did come, at that point we didn't plan for it. So we had to pay the price.
All week long during Vegas, we were anticipating long runs, and for whatever reason, a lot of the splits in NIS did not see them that week, and it was one of those things where you kind of had to adapt on the fly. But once you've made your bed, you're kind of where you're at. So having the fortitude to actually stay there and complete that when things aren't going your way, and still fight for a good result, that shows a lot of character.
Yeah, and that's the thing. During that race, that week, we'll say, you had guys, burning their right front up without a question, just driving it as hard as they could, and with just how everything fell, they're the ones that ended up doing well just because of how the cautions and stuff fell. The last green flag run, I did play some factor into that. I think some of the guys that were pushing beyond limits, probably it hurt them. But a lot of the guys that were blowing by us in the first 5 laps of a run that we were running down in the second half of the run, those guys were able to make a better race for themselves than they really should have, in my opinion, that week. And had it been a typical week, you would have saw, I feel, Richard and I do really well that week. And unfortunately, Vegas is one that keeps eluding me. But Richard still finished really well that week. I think I was not far behind. I don't remember for sure. But Richard, any more opinion on that?
Really with Vegas, I think if we wouldn't have had the cautions, like you said, that race would have been ours. I mean, there were several other ones that I participated in there at Vegas that would have been the same boat, right? You really need a green flag run to separate the people who are really using up their tires and those that are set for the long haul. When you get those short green flag runs and allow everybody to get new sets of tires and more importantly, bunch everybody back up and that's what really causes the mess, right? Once we group the cars back up after a caution and we get them restarted, cautions breed cautions, and that seems to be the trend. Probably the last 3 weeks, I would say, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I agree completely. That's unfortunate. I mean, we saw it at Phoenix too. Same deal, and I had a really good run there at Phoenix. Should have won the race. Got some damage from somebody dive bombing me, which is typical for no banking tracks. But I had a significant amount of damage. Still finished 7th place. I mean, we've had some really fast cars. I can't give enough credit to Jordan. He's put together some really fast stuff for us. Some of the best stuff out there. I haven't seen anybody really be able to compete with us, and so that I'm looking really forward to the future with our setups. Evan, do you have anything you want to talk about as far as setups?
Not specifically, no. Other than to agree with everything you've just said, it gives us a lot of optimism going forward. Especially, we're a team that are focused on ovals, and I do think that right now on the ovals, we are really well equipped with what we're putting in each. I guess it's not under each driver anymore, since this is sim rigs, but what we're putting in the files of each driver for setups. I think that what we're getting from our guys, specifically Jordan Schmeets and his group that he's working with there for testing and whatnot, what we're getting from those guys week in and week out is just, I gotta say, it seems to be second to none right now, and I have full faith that as we continue to grow and get better input from each of us as drivers, to give that information back to Jordan and the team, I think that'll only make us better in the long run, and I'm really excited about where we're headed.
Yeah, so anything else, Richard, as far as Revline, anything you're excited for in the future? We have a All-Star race coming up. I'm not sure how much you know about that. It's going to be at North Wilkesboro, same week as the Cup guys are there. Probably going to schedule it for Friday night or Monday night. Not sure which one yet, but I think right now we're kind of leaning more towards Friday night. But whoever wins that race is going to get $100. It's going to be strictly Revline drivers. But are you excited about that? Are you excited for other stuff that we have going on? I mean, we have a lot of projects coming up. Anything you're excited about at all, Richard?
Well, really, I didn't know about the All-Star race. Obviously, yes, that definitely excites me. Be interesting to take the cars right out onto that track. And really with Revline, can't say enough about Jordan sets that are getting built, and it's every week that we have a rocket ship, right? We haven't had an off week yet. Every week we get in that car, it's a rocket ship. Everywhere we go, we just need luck to fall our way, and once that happens, I think every one of our drivers is more than capable of winning in their splits. Really moving forward, really looking forward to meeting some of the new drivers. I don't really know Christopher Norris yet. I haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time with them, but ultimately, just working with everybody. I really love the camaraderie, and really looking forward to not just driving Jordan sets, but starting to learn, how do you build a set? What can you change to affect this, right? How can I make the car tighter in the middle, looser in the middle, tighter off, etc. I'm really looking forward to seeing what that side of the world looks like.
Yeah, that's one thing I really like about Jordan and how he's going about building and stuff. He's very willing to help. If you're feeling this in the car, he's very willing to say, make this adjustment. Got to raise this spring, got to add more poundage to a shock, whatever the case. Got to change the rear gear, got to add preload, change the ARB arm, whatever the case. He's helping you out with whatever you're feeling, and that's one thing that's really really great about having someone like Jordan to be able to help build setups and show you and teach you how to do it yourself. So Evan, anything else for Richard?
Other than the best of luck and all the hope in the world for a continued successful season, I really have no other questions for Richard right now. But he's given me a lot of hope that we're going to see some great results out of these new guys, himself included. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like Richard, I really like what you've done so far on the team. I think we have a bright future with you, and hopefully you feel the same. So just a little background so far with Richard on NIS this year. So NASCAR Racing Series. So far in 2023, 3 pole awards, as Evan mentioned earlier. He also had a 3rd place finish at Daytona 500. So, Richard, anything else you'd like to talk about before we let you go?
No, I think, once again, I really enjoy the camaraderie here at Revline. Really appreciate all the people here and you gentlemen allowing me to join the team, and I look forward to a very bright future, and let's go racing.
I like that.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Richard, for coming in and joining the second episode of the Revline Podcast. We really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we'll have you on in the future down the road. And yeah, thank you for showing up.
Thanks for having me.
Well, everybody, that was a few moments spent with Richard Peterson, who is yet another rising star here at Revline Racing. Really happy with the first 2 episodes and how they've been. Really glad to have you along for the journey, and really looking forward to having you back next week. So make sure you follow all of our social media so you can get updated every time we post a new episode, and we look forward to seeing you every week. Thank you for listening to Revline Racing's official podcast. Tune in next week for the next episode.